Welcome to the History Help channel. Today, we are covering the historiography section for historical method. We already looked into Greek historiography in the previous lessons. Today, we'll be looking into the Roman historiography. So, what exactly is Roman historiography? So, the historiography written during the time when Rome was uh, growing more powerful was known as the Roman historiography. So, Greek and Roman historiography both are part of ancient historiography. The Christian historiography, all of them are the later part. So, Greek and Roman constitute ancient historiography. So, Roman historiography was actually following that of Greeks. So, Greeks were the first Greece was the first to write about history, narrative history, but Romans who over came Greeks politically, culturally, they started following the Greeks. So Roman historiography was not native. It was borrowed from Greek, and it was written also in Greek. So what happened was Romans for the first 500 years were only constructing, building empires, waging wars. They did not have time to write about their history. But when they overcame Greece and when they read about Herodotus and Thucydides, they also felt that they had to write history. They had to record their achievements. So that is when Roman historiography or Roman historians came into picture. So for 500 years, as I mentioned, they did not write history. They were building and conquering nations. So everything was borrowed from Greece. So let's see the features of Roman historiography. First of all, they wrote biographies. So biographies about a person and about events. So they mostly focused on people, administrators, leaders. They wrote about wars, conquests. So everything was like biographies and political history. So they did not focus on the economic part or the social part. None of them actually got much this one importance. Only political history they wrote. So basically, the glorious deeds of leaders they wrote. One more thing, it was not native. So as I mentioned earlier, they adopted it from Greek. So it was not native. The quality was also inferior to Greeks. So the first 500 years they did not write history, but they went on building empires and waging wars. And this one, there were a lot of events. So there was a lot of material for them to write. But because of the volume also, and because of also the number of 500 years, quality was forgotten. So there were so many volumes, abundant material was there, but it had to be interpreted, it had to be presented well. So that was quite difficult. So quality usually generally suffered in Romans. And also, when Roman historians wrote about Rome, it was not objective. So they mostly wrote about rulers. They praised the authorities. They praised the court life. So it was not objective. So bias was there. So the entire thing was uh, Rome was completely whatever it was about generals, administrators, and emperors. So nothing else was more important for them. So let us look into a little bit more about the Roman historians. The first one we will talk about is Cato the Censor. The picture on the right is of Cato. So he was known as the father of Roman historiography. He lived from 234 to 149 BC. So his book is known as the Origins, and it was in Latin. And He was the first Latin writer. So earlier, the Romans used to write also in Greek only. So Cato was one person who wrote in Latin. He was known as the father of Roman historiography. He was a Latin writer. And one of the things about him was in his entire work, he has not given any nouns or any names. He has only given importance to soldiers. So he believed that when there is a war, it is the soldiers and their bravery that is more important than the general. So he has not mentioned any names except for a name Surus, which was actually that of a elephant. So no names he has given. So he tells the purpose of history is to teach morals and uh, uh, give a purpose to the egg. So he felt that history had a purpose. He also stressed on education. So he said, how should he talked about the nature of education, the value of education, and he said what is the history's stand in education and all. So nobody knows much about Cato the censor, though he was a public figure. He worked. His last office was he was a censor. So he's known as the Cato the censor or Cato the elder, but nothing about his early career or life is known. So that's about him. Next, in brief, we will mention about Julius Caesar, who was also he wrote two books, uh, commentaries on Gallic War and commentaries on Civil War. Now, both these are histories, but this was written with the purpose of getting public on his side. So, Julius Caesar wrote about his role in Gallic War and his role in Civil War just to influence the public. So, this is more biased. So, it's not really a uh, unbiased or objective history. It is just compilations to support Julius Caesar. But still, you can say that he was his works are important for Rome. Next, we will look into Livy. So, Livy, the person Livy is like Herodotus, you can say. He had a very powerful narrative. So, his period is from 59 BC. He was a very wealthy person. He never had to actually work. Also, he was a friend of Caesar, Emperor Augustus Caesar. So he wrote the book History of Rome. Actually, it was 142 books he has written, and only out of which only 35 have survived. So he has written about Rome from its foundations to empire building, how the republic fell, how empire was built. Everything he has written in his History of Rome book. He believed that, I'm sorry about the spelling, history should instruct. So his belief was that history should, job is to instruct the uh, 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 reader. It should be able to teach about virtue, morality, and all, and it should promote patriotism. It should instill discipline. So both Cato the censor and Livy believe that history should inculcate patriotism. So his narrative was very interesting, like Herodotus. His literary quality was also very good. So basically, he has written both about ancient period of Rome and the modern period of Rome in his time period, and he has written from the foundations to his empire building of Rome. So uh, but one thing was he was his source was not very organized, like he never told who he was referencing or who was the authority whom he talked with. So that is not very clear from his statements. Also, he was not critical in the sense he believed whatever he heard. So for writing about foundations of Rome, he believed traditions, folk tales. So he's written all that. So it's not really objective and accurate. Okay. Also, there is chronological errors, like timeline errors are there. So these are some of the defects in his work. But in spite of that, he has inspired Romans. The next person who is a very important historian is Tacitus. His name is actually Cornelis Tacitus. He was from 55 AD to 120 AD. So now we are coming to the AD. Until now, whomever we spoke about were all in the BC period. Now we are coming into the 55 AD to 120 AD, that is the first century. So Tacitus, Cornelius Tacitus, was an aristocrat. He was also a lawyer, he was an orator. He married the governor, Roman governor of Great Britain, whose name was known as Julius Agricola. So he married the daughter of a governor. So he had powerful connections. Okay, and he wrote many books. One of them is Life of Agricola. So Agricola was actually in Great Britain, and his father-in-law was ruling that part. He was a Roman governor. So he has written the Life of Agricola. The Tacitus has written, where he talks about the how Britons were, what were their life, how what were the wars in that Britain area, how was Agricola administered. All this is written in the Life of Agricola. Next book he has written is on dialogue on orators. As I told you earlier, he was a good orator. So in this dialogue on orators book, he has talked about speeches, the importance of speeches and all, how to give a speech and all that. Then the next book is about Germania, which talks about customs and beliefs in ancient Germany. So there is a description of practices, institutions of Germany, and also about the different German tribes. The next book he has written is Annals and History. So Annals talks about the dynasty, Julian dynasty. Historia also talks about Julian dynasty. So Annals talks about Julian dynasty from the Emperor Tiberius to Nero, and Historia talks about from death of Nero till death of another ruler, Domitian. So this is basically about political rulers. His sources are very good because he was an administrator. He had access to all officers and all. He also studied the archives, learned, studied contemporary history. He had officers in various places, so his sources were very accurate. He was able to gain knowledge, and he also was, for example, for writing Germania, he collected the information from officers who were there in the borders, and whatever he got, he put his own interpretation to it. He had his own style. So this is Tacitus. More about him: he was very critical. Even emperors were scared of him. Tacitus basically was a republican. He did not like the monarchy, so he was critical about the monarch. But he could understand and analyze events. So Tacitus was similar to Thucydides of Greek. So he was critical and accurate. He has written, he was also a moralist. Some of the quotations that he writes is more corrupt the state, the more numerous loss it will have. And he has also said, if a war, when a commander wins, he claims victory, but he will not claim the defeat. So basically, he was not in favor of empire or emperor, or monarchy. He was more into republic. But again, Tacitus himself had some problems. So his scope was very narrow. In the sense, he wrote about a history of Rome, or he has written about histories and annals. He has definitely written about tribes, but still, he has no idea of economic events. He does not talk about people or the industry or the trade or the art or even about women. So the scope of his is very narrow. Also, that's why no idea of economics, no life of people. He was also partial. Partial in the sense he was he was like, um, he always felt that kings were monsters kind of thing. So he was a more of an artist. He did not very study very deeply. Everything was like he tried to write too much, but whether it was history or not is difficult to say. That is what Collingwood says. So Collingwood says that Tacitus is a gigantic figure, but whether he was a historian at all is something to be thought of. So this is a picture of his Annals book. So bring out the contribution of Romans in development of historiography is the question that you are most likely expect. So the next thing we will learn is about Christian historiography. So thank you.